we are on our final stretch. This is Politics as Usual, a special episode on cybersecurity, cyber attacks, given that we have elections, an automated election system in 2 months. On May 9, 2022, Comelec spokesman James Jimenez, technology editor of Manila Bulletin, and cybersecurity analyst Art Samaniego, and James Allworth of Cloudflare still back with us together. We have more questions for you, James Allworth. Well, this is something that's been coming up, but I think it's important to remind people why should we be concerned about our personal accounts, our data getting hacked?
Well, this is the equivalent of our house keys and our personal records. It gives making sure that this is secure is incredibly important, given how much people spend online. So making sure accounts are secure. If your account's not secure, you're effectively able to, or someone's able to impersonate you online wherever they have access to your account. So be that with your bank, with your email provider, on social media, it's incredibly important to make sure that accounts are secure for that reason. Now, data is actually getting too much the same way. When you call up a bank, they will often ask you a series of questions to authenticate yourself, to make sure that you are really who you say you are. If they get access to sufficient information about you, your birthday, other personally identifying information about you, like your addresses, it's such that they're able to impersonate you in all kinds of ways that you really don't want them to.
Well, I think you're touching on a subject which we wanted to talk about. How is the data retrieved or stolen in the first place? Art, touched on this, the idea or the subject of phishing. And you said two-factor authentication is, a move in the right direction, though. But then it does ask you for extra data about you. It does ask you about what is your middle name, what was the name of your first pet, and these are questions that often find their way onto your passwords. I'm getting. Do you get what I'm pointing at here? The more data you give, or the more information you give via things like two-factor authentication, the more of your details are actually floating around on the web. Am I moving in the right direction with that thought?
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're driving at, Paolo. I think it's a case of organizations that you're able to trust. So if my bank asks me for my mother's maiden name, I'm much more comfortable giving it to them. If it's a random website that I'm signing up for because I want to get on a forum, then I will be much more judicious in the information that I share. The other thing that I would say is that there are other ways of doing two-factor authentication that there are authenticator apps that you can download, like that very similar in nature to the little keychains that banks will sometimes give, that give you a randomly generated number that always changes. So you're able to do things like two-factor authentication without necessarily providing Google or Facebook or sometimes a bank more data. It's actually one of the most secure ways that you can do two-factor authentication. And then the last thing you said about sometimes personal information making it into passwords, I would really encourage people not to do that. And again, if you search online for a password manager, that's a really good first step in protecting your online identity.
Okay, Pia was proudly reporting to me that she actually uses a password manager. And I think it is an excellent solution because you want your password to be as difficult as possible to crack, but at the same time, the more difficult it is to crack, the more difficult it is to remember. And that's probably why we choose simpler passwords.
Art Samaniego had this big smile on his face when Paolo was asking a question earlier. So Art, I think you want to answer that question also. And at the same time, talk to us also about how this is all going to be used to influence the outcome of the elections. Earlier, we were speaking to James Jimenez, and he was saying, and so were the other commissioners, lock, stock, and barrel, that's paraphrasing, wala tayong problema, we're not going to have a problem with the elections, no? Art?
Natawa ako dun sa password kasi. Dun sa password.
Yeah.
So, a password should be easy to remember but hard to guess.
Okay.
So yun yung dapat. Also, treat your password as your underwear. You don't share it to anybody, you don't let anybody see it, and reuse your underwear. It's like your password. Do not reuse your password. Every account should have a different password.
Words to
Si Art,
live
Kasi
by.
si Art
pag
talaga.
nanakaw
Yeah.
yung isang account mo, wipe
Oo.
out lahat yung
Yeah.
yung iba mong accounts.
Si Art talaga, yung mga soundbites niya, para makahulog ka lang,
I
mahulog ka lang sa
know.
upuan.
But
eh.
it makes
Don't
perfect
share
sense.
your
Don't
ano?
share your underwear and don't share your passwords.
Okay.
It makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense to me.
Okay, pero
Don't reuse your underwear, don't reuse your password.
okay. Art, teka, pag-usapan natin, let's talk about the elections. And from passwords and underwear to the elections. But anyway, sorry about that. Art, the outcome of the elections, you know, of course, there's a lot of concern, di ba? Given everything that's happening, and then we have elections in 2 months' time, no? How is this all going to impact on May 9?
I have a request from the Senate not to talk about this
Yeah.
incident because of the sensitivity of the
Yeah.
information that we got.
What
So
this?
in
What
respect
is
to the
this?
Senate, I'll talk
Yeah.
after the hearing of the Senate pag may permission na ako.
Okay. But, you know, earlier, James was saying that there was no hacking that happened. And if I remember correctly, hindi ba, no? Paolo, kanina, sabi nga ni James. Diba, James, you were saying that, as a matter of fact, the hackers were actually going after a third party,
Yes.
right?
No, I would just like to make it clear that all the information that we got from the tipster appear to be files from the COMELEC.
Okay. Yeah. De, ganito na lang, Art.
So,
Maybe.
that's why we're saying that it's from the COMELEC, and we asked COMELEC to verify it.
Okay. Well, maybe I can ask it this way, Art.
Sinasabi
Yeah.
ng COMELEC ngayon na hindi kami nahack, pero hindi nila sinasabi kung sino yung nahack. Even
Yeah.
the DICT and the CICT says it's the third-party provider of the COMELEC, which has no presence in the Philippines without the COMELEC.
Okay. Well, Art, maybe I can ask this question of you.
I have a
Yes,
request
you've been
of the
asked.
Senate not to talk
Yes,
about
yes.
it.
But
Thank
can
you.
I ask this question and then tell me if you can answer this? No. How confident are you in our elections?
Ginagawa ng ito ha, nakikita ko ha, ginagawa ng COMELEC ang lahat to secure the election.
Okay, that's good enough.
Well,
Sige.
I think maybe we can ask James to react to that, because if there's one thing I think that will cast any kind of a shadow of a doubt on you as a voter, on us as a voter, whether or not the very tenet of the democratic election process is that, you know, your vote is sacred and your vote is actually going to be counted. But whenever there is you know, a past experience of information leaking, of you know, a hacker being able to get into your system, it casts a shadow of a doubt and leaves a very bad taste in the mouth of the voter. I, as a voter, wonder if my vote is actually going to be counted. How do we reassure people that you know, in this round of elections, James, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're airtight?
Well, that's a tough job. That's a tough job, Paolo. See, the thing is this, no? When people talk about hacking, they're not talking about the election system that we use. Again, because our elections are offline, they're not really hackable in that sense. We don't use an electronic voting system. We don't use a system that really depends on online systems for it to work. We have a system that is entirely offline. There is a part of it that leverages the use of networks and transmissions, but even that is severable. It's something that you can take away, right? And it would not affect the outcome of the elections. Yun nga ang problema natin dito. Ang problema natin is that I guess the automated election system is still very new to a lot of people. The concepts involved are still very new, and that there's still a lot of fear about the unknown, about something that is not fully understood yet. But bottom line, as far as the hackings thus far are concerned, the COMELEC stands by its word that there really is no threat to the electoral system. Again, this is not to trivialize cybersecurity matters. Cybersecurity is a major problem. But the way the electoral system is designed right now, speaking specifically of this point in time, we feel that there is very little threat
Okay.
to the integrity of that system arising from these hackings.
Just-
Of course, the hackers are going to say different, but again, bottom line, we are offline.
All right, just really quick. It came to my mind. We're focusing on the elections, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about how we might pivot should we see a rise in cases of COVID. Should there be a new variant that will keep us home? Are we in any way ready to pivot to another system where we don't have to show up and actually fill in our ballots and hand in our ballots? And how will that then affect the security?
Would we be able to email our votes?
Will we be going to an online voting
Yeah.
system? Do we have a backup system, and how secure would that system be?
We're not ready. We're not ready to pivot to that to any alternative system right now. Voting by mail is not available to us. Obviously, you need a strong postal system as a backbone for any online voting for any postal voting system. Online voting again is still years away from realization in the Philippines. We are probably closing in on it for overseas voting, but not for local. So in-person voting is really what we have right now.
Or-
I see.
Yeah, we ran out of time. And I think this means that we should have a part 2 of this. Or maybe
Absolutely.
you should have a tech show, Paolo.
Well, there's an idea.
Yeah.
I'd love to have everybody back, particularly James Allworth. Great
Right.
information. Thank you so much, James, for being with us.
Thank you, James Allworth, James Jimenez, and Art Samaniego. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. We've been told before, don't talk politics at the dinner table or the family reunion or in Viber groups and risk digital warfare. But we can talk about it here at this table on the show. Your weekly political appointment fix, politics as usual. I'm Pia Ontiveros.
And I'm Paolo Obrera. I hope tonight has been as interesting for you as it was for me.
It was for me. Thank you, Paolo.
Pleasure.
See you back here next Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Welcome back to Politics as Usual. I'm Pia Ontiveros together with Paolo Abrera, my special guest co-anchor for this special episode. That ang pinag-uusapan natin ngayon, cybersecurity, cyber attacks in light of our elections in May, in 2 months' time. And syempre, ang dami kasi mga cyber attacks that have been happening, Paolo. So our next guest is James Allworth. He's head of innovation of Cloudflare, right? An internet infrastructure and cybersecurity company. He's joining us from Singapore. Hi, James. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Let's begin with this. What is and then tell us, what is correct, how to correctly pronounce it. Is it DDoS or DDoS attack? What is
DDoS.
it? DDoS. Okay,
Yeah,
what is it?
DDoS.
Then you can describe it this
Well-
way, You can be as technical and as techy as possible, and then give us the layman's definition.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you both for having me. A DDoS attack, well, it stands for a distributed denial of service attack. At its most basic level, this is a malicious attack designed to take a server offline. So how does it do it? Well, think of the internet like a network with a series of computers, and your phone, you want to access something on the internet, perhaps from your computer. You go and try and do that. The way a DDoS attack works is it floods the server that you're trying to reach that has the information that you want, preventing you from gaining access to it. So we talked about it being like a traffic network or a phone network. So imagine you're trying to call someone up, but someone wants to stop you and they have 100 people all around the world calling the number at the same time. It effectively prevents you from gaining access to that server, and it can do it at the level of the server. The server gets overwhelmed, or it can congest the networks, the bandwidth pipes that are trying to get to the server. There are a range of different ways of doing it. And the way hackers do this is they compromise a number of machines into what's called a botnet, and effectively turn computers or phones or other devices into zombie devices. They appear to be working, but they're waiting for a call from the hacker to basically say, okay, send a flood, send a phone call, send a request to this server because we want to try and knock it offline. And so when that device receives the command, it floods the destination and it knocks the server offline.
Back
And
in the
just-
day, yeah, back in the day in the 1970s, we had those, what is it, the rotary phones, right? And when you call someone, and then sometimes there's a cross line, di ba? Remember?
party line, a
a
cross
party
line,
line.
yeah.
Parang, is it like that? No,
Well, in
not
effect,
exactly.
I think what James is describing is basically a traffic jam of information. I mean, you're trying to get information from a particular site, but the hackers have flooded it with so many requests
Yeah.
for information.
But so,
that
and it's not a
unable to keep up.
it's not a real traffic jam. It's
Well, it's a traffic jam.
manipulated.
It's a traffic jam of information. I mean,
Information, yeah.
the requests for information is there, but it's coming from so many sources, from so many computers. I wanted to ask James, so when you describe these zombie computers, zombie devices, are we talking about devices that may be or are in fact making these requests without the owner knowing? I mean, these aren't devices set up by the hacker. It's not like a big farm of computers under the control of the hacker. We're talking about devices, maybe perhaps like the one that's in my hand or sitting on your desk, your desktop, that's sort of taken hostage. Is that what we're talking about here, James?
That's exactly it. Computers are often a common device that are compromised, but it's also things that you might not expect that are now connected to the internet. We're connecting everything to the internet. We're connecting cameras to monitor our houses. We're connecting doorbells. Like, we're getting smart devices. These devices are often not as commonly patched. People aren't as cautious about keeping them up to date as they would be with a computer or a phone. And so once a vulnerability is discovered, if someone's not actively managing them in the background, which like a lot of folks, you buy one of these devices, you don't think you need to apply software updates to it. They're not actively managing it. A vulnerability is discovered. Hackers are consistently scanning for vulnerabilities like this. They take over the device, or they turn it into this zombie like I described, and it just sits there. It appears to be working as normal, and then one day they want to attack something. They send the command, and your smart doorbell is attacking a server somewhere else in the world.
So your average tito or tita of Manila should not ignore the update your software notifications.
Right,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay. I'll remember that. Yeah.
Well, I think I just wanted to frame it. We're talking about the big picture of how cybercrime and hacking affect or are going to affect us and play a role in the upcoming elections. But I think it also pays to frame it in that there are roles that each of our individual lapses in security will play. If we don't safeguard the security of our personal devices, they then become part of this zombie bot network, which can be weaponized and used against whatever organization you're targeting. James, what would be the best course of action to sort of avoid being part of this zombie army?
Right. So, Paolo, you touched on one of these already just before. Keeping your software up to date is absolutely essential. Vulnerabilities are discovered on devices on a regular basis, phones, computers, smart devices. Manufacturers are normally pretty good at responding. It's really important that you keep your devices up to date. There are a range of other things that are important beyond just DDoS attacks, though, which if you don't keep things up to date, like a device can become one of those zombies. But there are just other general good habits that you should have around cybersecurity. Art touched on a few of them before. Not sharing passwords is a really important one. I would say not reusing passwords across accounts is really important. So what can happen is a site can get compromised, and once a hacker downloads all the usernames and passwords, one of the first things they will do is endeavor to use those same usernames and passwords on other sites to see whether people are using the same passwords, because most people can remember one, maybe two, maybe three. And so you get into one account, and then a hacker's into two accounts and three accounts and four accounts. Multi-factor authentication, or what's otherwise known as two-factor authentication, is something that's really valuable to do. This is where you get a second layer of identification beyond just your password. So this is when your bank might text you to send you a text with a confirmation code that you have to enter in. For important accounts like emails, banks, social media, I think that's a really good idea. Using a password manager is even more advanced, where what it will do is it will generate a random password for you for each one of the different accounts that you have, so you don't have to remember all the different passwords. Phishing is a really important thing to be aware of now. So making sure that you're cautious before clicking on links on email, or like Art mentioned, clicking on links on social media. That's one way that people can get compromised. And then the last thing that's best practice here is to really make sure you have an offline backup of important information. If there's stuff that's super important and there's a potential for it to be compromised, keeping it backed up is a really good practice.
James, what other forms of what are the other forms of cyber attacks? And earlier Art was saying that more people are, almost everyone in the world is online because of the pandemic. So that's why there are so many cyber attacks now, because almost everyone's online.
I mean, that is definitely part of it. If you think about how business was conducted 20 years ago, a lot of it was walking into a bank and or walking into a store. There wasn't this vector, but now everybody is online, and so there's just so much more opportunity for cyber attacks to be taking place. There are again that many more people. That many people who aren't paying attention to cybersecurity, so it can also be a very lucrative way for hackers to spend their time, whether it's compromising individuals or compromising businesses.
Let's talk a little bit big picture here. What about state-sponsored cyber attacks? This is a term that you hear quite often, and perhaps, in the sphere of putting it against the larger picture of our elections, how big a deal is a larger organization, something as big as an entire country, working against you?
Man, that's as serious as it can get. I mean, in the same way that we just talked about how business used to be conducted offline, but now it's online. The military work used to be conducted purely on the battlefield, and now it can be conducted digitally as well. Many nations have folks working for them in this capacity, and if you're a hostile nation and you want to target a nation or target another organization or even an individual, they have people in their employ that can focus focus and do this kind of thing. And it's just another reason why it's important for everyone, from governments through to businesses through to individuals, to be so focused on paying attention to cybersecurity, because that is another vector through which hostile actors can interfere with the runnings of a government or a business or even your life.
Okay, well, how are we able to actually identify? I mean, once you have things like DNS fronting, you have IP masks. You can't quite tell who the threat actors are. How do we then identify that an attack is, for example, a state-sponsored attack, or if it's just a small-time teenager in his basement, trying to ramp up his hacking credibility?
I mean, it's an excellent question. One of the things that differentiates the online world from the physical world is it's that much easier for folks to cover their tracks. And so we were talking earlier about DDoS attacks. Most countries have laws on the books preventing DDoS attacks, making them illegal. But when it comes to a device that's been compromised in another country and appears to be a legitimate traffic, it's owned by an actual human and they use it for legitimate purposes. Like, it can be very hard to stop that. It can be very hard to figure out who originated the attack, because someone's controlling that zombie device, but it's not always possible to tell who. Now, in the instance of large-scale cyber attacks against organizations or large governments, the folks who are who are on the receiving end of that often have teams that are the specialists who are able to do the work to figure out who is responsible for it. But that, like you said, like, there are a number of ways that these hackers or these state-sponsored actors will use to cover their tracks, and it can make it extremely challenging sometimes to figure out who did it, which in turn makes it more attractive for state-sponsored actors to continue these attacks.
Right. Yeah, digital forensics is another very interesting field, and I'd love to discuss that a little further with James. James, we've really just scratched the surface here. Cloudflare Head of Innovation, James Allworth, will still be with us in the last segment of our show.